Watch out, I'm going to make up some terms and talk about tactics in Warhammer 40k 9th edition right after this quick intro. Okay, so what I want to talk about here is my experience playing 9th edition. Now, I've gotten a couple games under my belt finally, so I'm, of course, not an expert on everything, and so take this, of course, under that context. But what I have noticed, and I'm sure you maybe have seen it in competitive circles or anywhere, is just kind of the evolution of where we are with the game out of the gate. And that is pretty much board control. And I kind of want to introduce a couple new terms now. Of course, if someone has made this up, it sounds like this is really brain science with these words I'm going to use when it comes to it. But we've always known a term called alpha strike, and that basically means on the first turn, I blow up half of your army and I win the game just because I went first and got to go first and do that. But with 9th edition, of the predominance of having to kill more models than your opponent is much less. You can actually win the game with fewer models at the end of the game as long as you score points for the first couple rounds through secondaries and through the primaries by controlling objectives. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce this term, which I'm going to coin alpha control. And I've seen a lot of lists, a lot of the competitive community talking in general terms about getting units on objectives as quickly as possible. So this means that a lot of armies that have infiltrate or the ability to come in on turn one with deep strikes, like drop pods, that sort of thing, have an innate advantage because they'll be able to get on those midfield objectives where the most objectives are in almost all the standard missions. If you're playing a 2,000 point game, is that we have objectives that are kind of just in the middle or opposite ends of deployment zones, that sort of thing. So what I'm talking about is these infiltrating units like Nurglings, like Raven Guard, or things that have advanced movements like Alpha Legion. We want to have units that can get on the board on objectives on turn one and force your opponent to remove those before they do anything. And this also can go in the way of putting units in people's faces. So if you can put a threat in someone's face to keep them from coming onto the objectives on turn one, you have an advantage of controlling the game for the first couple rounds. Since we only have 5 rounds, and you also don't score primary points until the start of turn 2, this is really important. And it makes these type of alpha control armies way more powerful than even some alpha strike armies. And I'll give you an example. I recently played a game where I won not so much because I was able to kill my opponent's army, but because he was kind of a classic castle shooting army. But I was able to throw units at him and delay him from getting onto my objectives and onto the center objectives for the first couple turns, allow me to win the game. And honestly, if we had played an old style game where even if we were having a match where it goes 6 turns or 7 turns in older editions, he probably would have ended up winning the game because of how missions were developed back then. But now, since I was able to rack up points in the beginning, even though it was potential of him even tabling me by the end of the game, I was able to win pretty handily because I had forced myself, imposed my will on him in his deployment zone and also in the midfield. So jeez, I keep on forgetting to do this. I always forget to promote myself. I don't know why. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, do all those 3 things. That'd be really helpful. I really enjoy that. And there's always going to be a link below that's going to be kind of related to this topic. So yeah, click on that link too. Thanks. How are you going to counter this? Well, this is going to be my second new wonderful term I'm going to introduce here. Forgive me if anyone's also invented this term, but I'm going to call this advanced screening. And so typically in the past, we've had screens, protect your castle, but now we're having units that have to move their screens much farther forward. Once again, I'm going to talk about Nurglings. Nurglings are the best advanced screen in the game currently because they're cheap. They're also a troop choice, and they basically can screen out your opponent that might have an advanced move. So I'm talking Alpha Legions, Invictus War Suits, things that can, start on the deployment zone, but then before the first turn starts, but after you know who's going first, they can move before they actually do anything. So we're going to see a lot more of units doing that. We're talking about also scouts, beyond Nurglings. But if you have a unit like that, I'm also looking at Tyrannid Forge Roll Spores, then you're going to be able to counter people doing that. Now, if you both have this, then it's going to be this additional meta third roll off. We're going to be like, who gets to, deploy their advanced screen first? So we're seeing screens being pushed out way farther than we've ever had before. And this is just going to continue unless we get new actions and things like that that mitigate that. And, you know, if we get these new codexes, we get these new actions, we're going to start to see maybe more kill actions, and we might return to an old version of the game. But as it's currently constructed, if your army can, you know, basically alpha control instead of alpha strike, and you have advanced screens, you're going to be in a pretty good way going to be able to dominate the game. And you might have to spend points on units that you think are inefficient, but if they have those abilities, you have to include them in your army. What I want to talk about next that's related to this whole topic, and that is the topic of secondaries. As you can imagine, a lot of competitive players are focusing on certain secondaries at the behest of, at the behest? How do you say that? The behest? I think I'm pretty sure I got that wrong, but they're taking certain secondaries over other ones. And what I specifically want to talk about is engage in all fronts. This seems to be the most popular secondary across the board, hands down for competitive play. The reason for this is, first off, you can get max points with it, which is a lot of secondaries are very hard to do that, but this is kind of a consistent 15-point secondary that you can get reasonably well. And basically what the secondary is that it's old recon. It's having units fully within each table quarter away from the center. So this means that we have a lot of weird units being taken. And the main one I want to talk about is the Land Speeder Tempest from Forge World, which got a points reduction. But the thing you have to understand about the Tempest Land Speeder is that it moves 70 inches. So no matter where you are on the board with this thing, you can have it in the far corner. It can get to a quarter of the board that needs to go in order to score points on turn one. And if you can have a secondaries that score points on turn one, then this is very critical. You want to avoid, people are avoiding secondaries where you have to wait for the command phase like the primaries. So engage on fronts fits this bill, and this is why it's so popular. And also, like I was talking about with advanced screens, advanced control, if you have units that are able to move onto the center of the board but then move out on turn one in order to get into all four corners, then you're going to already have a leg up on your opponent, and vice versa. You're forcing him not to be able to do this because he's going to be stuck in the corner. So expect to see land speeders of all varieties on the tabletop because of that fly keyword. Even though it has been nerfed, it allows you to move over pretty much anything and also sit on top of terrain pretty much anywhere as well. Another thing to look out for is, you know, we still have a prevalence of dedicated transports. This is going to be kind of a pseudo counter to these advanced screening things. Is we have a strong, you know, dedicated transport that can come on, hold an objective, then if they blow up, they deposit things that are, you know, objective secured. This is still a very valuable strategy, and you're to see, of course, millions of Wave Serpents, the Mechanicus dedicated transport. I don't even want to try to pronounce that one. Rhinos, Razorbacks, Impulsors are super fantastic. That's not changing. Chaos Rhinos are pretty decent. Their points cost is not that terrible. But if you also may notice, we've seen kind of a rise of Termites, another Forge World unit that is pretty expensive still, but allows a lot of armies that don't have a kind of drop poddy thing to have a drop pod thing. And that also means, of course, we're going to see drop pods because they can still come on turn one, which is quite effective. So those are just some of my first kind of initial thoughts. Just want to introduce, you know, this idea of advanced screens and alpha control over alpha strike, because now we don't have to kill as much. I mean, we're still going to kill because you need to kill things off of objectives in order for you to take the objectives. But if you can get on top of your opponent in the first couple turns, it makes it extremely difficult for them to come back, especially if they chose a bad secondary here or there. It's really going to give you a leg up in all your games. So just really focus on trying to have units that can either screen out these advanced control units or advanced screen units, and just go from there. So with that, this has been a short video, but you know, it was a topic I want to talk about. Recently been playing some games. So with that, see you guys next week. Bye.